In today's world, we are increasingly dependent on technology. Our business and personal lives rely on it, but as you've probably noticed, it's unreliable. They promise it'll get better, but it usually gets worse. Our computers are slow, so we end up squinting at smartphones and tablets. We live in constant fear that something's going to happen to our personal data, so we're scared into paying for fake protection that proves useless when disaster strikes. Update attacks, fake Wi-Fi, cloud control, and other industry scandals are designed to keep the money flowing. The jokers we pay to fix our stuff have no clue what they're doing, so they do a virus scan and then wipe out our precious photos. Intelligent, successful people feel intimidated by the chaos and think it's somehow their fault. If they only knew what the industry was doing to them, they'd get torches and pitchforks. If only we had someone to explain it all in plain English so we can start protecting ourselves. Oh wait, we do! It's the Computer Exorcist Podcast with your host, Marc Anthony Arena.
From the Wallace Memorial microphone in my home office, overlooking the can of worms in downtown Rochester, New York, this is the Computer Exorcist Podcast. My name is Marc Anthony Arena. I am so glad you have joined me today. We're gonna jump right in here and get into some articles. I've got a bunch of articles from 2021 today. We're gonna catch up. We're going to catch up if it kills me here. We're going to catch up on these articles. And again, I mean, it's a great way to look at the concepts as eternal concepts. This isn't just fleeting news that our goldfish memories and the drive-by media have thrown at us at that moment. This is a great way for me to look at these articles and explain to you not only, hey, look, this happened, and here's what happened a couple of years later, here's the fallout from it, but also here are the eternal concepts, and here are the trends that went into this, and this is why this happened, and the trend is going up or down, so from a perspective of a couple of years later. Okay, Forbes.com, why you shouldn't use Google Chrome after a new privacy disclosure. This is by Zach Doffman. If you're among the billions of people using Chrome, and that's no exaggeration, then Google's stark new data harvesting disclosures should come as a nasty surprise. Google's under fire this week after the surprising amount of your data harvested by Chrome has been disclosed. This is a genuine threat to your privacy. It shatters Google's privacy-first web claims. Last year, Apple said it would force app developers to disclose the scale of data collected and link to its users. All eyes turned to Google and Facebook. Many suspected that this level of scrutiny would shine an alarming light on the world's two most valuable data machines, and that's exactly what happened. So you had Apple saying, look, hey, Google and Facebook, if you want to put your apps on our iPhones, we want you to disclose what you're doing to our users, okay? So it forced Google and Facebook to reveal what they've been doing to all users, not just Apple victims, right? The issue for Google is, unlike Facebook, it sits on both sides of the fence, guarding your privacy on one side with Android, Mail, and Docs, and an advertising behemoth on the other. Well, actually, they're sucking your information in with Google, Gmail, and Docs. So it's just another way for them to hoover your information. Apple's mandatory privacy labels have shown that these two ad giants to be well out of step with their peers when it comes to collecting your data. If your business model is monetizing your users' information, then you'll want to collect as much as you reasonably can, and Google and Facebook don't disappoint. Side note, Chrome came out of nowhere, and I want to say in the late noughties, in the late 2000s, and just eclipsed everybody and gained like 70-something% market share. They did a ton of advertising, and they snuck Chrome inside of all sorts of things like Adobe update attacks, and they They snuck Chrome into people's computers without their knowledge, and people, I don't know, it looks like the internet, I'm using it, right? It's the same reason that Clear browser and Wave browser and Avast browser and all these other fake browsers get in, because people just see a back and forward button and they see a search box, and I don't know, it says the internet, I'll use it. So Chrome came to power, so to speak, gained that market share by bombarding people relentlessly with installs until it eventually took over, right? And a lot of people's kids came over and put Chrome. All my clients, right? Oh, my kids came over and put Chrome. My kids came over and put Chrome. And I said, look, your kids don't realize, yeah, Chrome is a well-functioning browser, but it sucks all your information, begs you to sign in, it sucks everything you do. It's almost as bad as Edge as far as sucking everything you do and selling it. So the other thing they did is a reason for a lot of the abuse in my industry is the misconception, right? The other thing they did is so I don't know if it was anything intentional on their part where they told web developers to start developing for Chrome. I might have said this before, but the first day of the first week of the first year that I went to RIT, I was in a web development class, and they said, here's how you make websites. And at the time, you had to make a website specifically for Internet Explorer because it marched to its own drum, and then you had to make a website for everything else, which obeyed world standards. Then once Internet Explorer faded away, it was just world standards, W3C standards. And so they said, when you make a website, make sure it works properly on all browsers for all people. Well, what happened? Now, a lot of web developers who have no clue what they're doing just develop things specifically for Chrome. So when you go to certain bank websites, they say, oh, this is not going to work unless you get Chrome. So now these banks, just like people's kids, are recommending Chrome because they don't understand its hazards. I was told that you should be using Chrome. Well, it's because your web developers have no clue what they're doing, and you're leading people down the path of getting all their information sucked. So please, if you know someone who works at a bank, warn them, hey, look, don't tell people to fall off this cliff like lemmings and get involved in Chrome, because it sucks your data. If you have to deal with a low-quality bank website that demands Chrome, then please use Brave instead. Go to brave.com. It's a cousin of Chrome that's been de-Googled. They've ripped all of the Google filth. Like, you know when they say shrimp has been de-veined? Well, Brave is actually known as de-Googled. So it's Chrome, but it's all the treachery is gone. All right, anyway. Google doesn't care about protecting user privacy, DuckDuckGo warned this week. And they're a privacy-centric search engine alternative to Google, right? Because you've got a web browser, then you've got a search engine, and those are two separate concepts. The web browser is the piece of software that displays websites. The search engine is what you use to search for things, okay? They care about protecting their surveillance model. It's their business model. If they really cared about privacy, they would just stop spying on billions of people, right? It's that simple. I have already warned that Gmail collects more data than other leading platforms, says the author. Google CEO, in his defense, said, we don't use information in the apps where you primarily store personal content, such as Gmail, Google Drive, Calendar, and Photos, for advertising purposes, period. All right, so what do you use it for? I guess in the case of the Google Photos, they suck photos out of your phone without your knowledge now. If someone sends you a link that says, you need to open this with Google Photos, don't ever download the Google Photos app. It is malware. It sneaks into your phone and sucks all of the photos out of it without your knowledge. And then, oh, your Gmail account is full. You need to give us $1. So that's the scam there. But it is an app where you enter private and sensitive search terms and conduct private transactions, the author says. So yeah, even your Google search and your Gmail, you're typing in private search terms. And by the way, if you remember, Gmail patted themselves on the back because they no longer scanned your personal emails, but then the next morning they decided to just start recording every website you ever go to. So it's a little dance, right? Well, we're not going to spy on this anymore, but by the way, we're going to spy on all of this without telling anyone. So protecting user privacy is a binary philosophy. You either believe it's the right thing to do or you don't. Highlight that. Just as with Gmail, Chrome collects your user ID and device ID in too many categories. Unlike Safari, Edge, and Firefox, Chrome says it links all harvested data to devices and individuals. All harvested data to devices and individuals. Safari collects but doesn't link your browsing history. Okay, so why are they collecting it? And neither Firefox nor Edge link your usage data. All right. Edge, I'm sure Edge plays fast and loose with your data in other ways, even if they don't deliberately link it to you. Okay, and they do link it to your Microsoft account. And by the way, whenever you pull open anything, Edge on new computers now, Edge pounces on you viciously. And that you need to click continue, you need to click continue. And if you read the fine print right above continue, it says, can Edge continuously suck information out of other browsers? So even if you're not using Edge, and by the way, it takes a lot of effort to get away from Edge because it's so vicious and pops up viciously whenever you try to do anything else. Even if you successfully manage to get away from it, it sucks all your information from other browsers continually. Up until this year, browsers would just suck the prior information from the competing browser, and then they'd hope that you'd start using that new browser. But no, Edge sucks continually from other browsers. I'm the only person in the world who's created a script, by the way, that removes Edge completely and permanently. Originally, I wrote the script earlier this year, and it removed it completely, but then anytime you clicked on almost anything, Microsoft would respawn and replant the Edge malware into your computer, the evil fake browser into your computer. So I created a little part of the script where it takes the folder where Edge is supposed to go and I redirect it to a void. So it's kind of like I drill a hole in the universe, and whenever Microsoft tries to install Edge in that folder, it just goes out into space, so to speak. It's such a glorious thing. So if you are sick of Edge pouncing and attacking, then let me know and I can install the Edge Obliterator Script, which rips a hole in your computer's universe. It's so glorious. The fact is that Chrome collects more data than any of the other browsers. This is about an overarching attitude to privacy. Why does a web browser need my financial data? Asks security researcher Sean Wright. But it's yet more data collected under the guise of convenience. It's always, what do I say on this show? Almost every episode. They dangle convenience in front of you. Oh, but I like that I can say, hey, Alexa, what's the weather? And they dangle that convenience in exchange for your privacy. Google insists that the justification for its data collection is to provide features and functions. And unfortunately, they're right, because they've made people depend on this garbage so much, right? I mean, I could see one useful feature is Google, when you use Google Maps, you click on the place to type in an address and it shows a list of places you've been to recently. That's fine. But in exchange for that feature, they record where you are at all times, not just a history of what you've typed into that search box in Google Maps. Okay, so they dangle a little tiny bit of convenience and then they justify it. They justify recording your every move by saying, well, we got to give you that convenience that people have been accustomed to. It's the same rationale that WhatsApp gave for collecting its own treasure trove of data. The issue with that is that competing apps collect significantly less data but offer similar features, right? And I used to love WhatsApp. It works extremely well. But the moment Facebook bought it, it started recording not your actual conversations, but it now records who you're talking to and how often and where they are. Ha! Interesting. Whereas the other apps like Signal and Telegram and all that don't. So I highly recommend you switch to Signal. It's a nonprofit and they don't record you and monitor you and all that. It's also wrong to only compare mainstream apps with privacy-first specialists. Chrome versus DuckDuckGo, right? I mean, DuckDuckGo is really, really oriented toward your privacy as far as search engines go. Or WhatsApp versus Signal. right? Okay, so I mean, obviously I want people to use DuckDuckGo and Signal, right? But what the author's saying here is it's wrong to compare the mainstream ones with the privacy ones off the bat. He says, start out by comparing Google and Apple and Microsoft. That makes sense because looking across the three tech giants does not paint a pretty picture for Google. So he's saying, look, yeah, Google's not going to be as saintly as the privacy-oriented ones, but it's bad even when compared with its peers, compared with Apple and Microsoft. Okay, that's really saying something. I get what he's saying there. It's very impactful. Google makes its money selling ads tailored to you as an individual, contextualized by your search or activity. Okay, so that's how they make their money. They're selling ads, and I totally get that, okay? So Google's plan is to replace cookies with a so-called federated learning of cohorts, or FLoC. A clever way to say the anonymization of individual users into groups of users with common characteristics. It's the kind of cleverness you'd expect from an ad giant. Okay, so two things there. Remember a couple of years ago we did an article about how Google wants to kill the URL, that long thing, so it's like joeblow.com / and then a billion characters. That was their way of saying, look, here's a mess, right? It's very messy, so we're going to simplify it by taking complete control over it ourselves. And that's always the case with cloud companies, right? This is messy. We'll all agree this is messy. Therefore, we're going to simplify it by consolidating power. Be careful of that. Be careful that it's always better to have something messy with your freedom, right? It's always better to have a little mess with freedom. Like in 1984 when he says there's always hope in the proles, right? The main character goes to the proletariat section of town, and it's very messy and chaotic, but they're happy and free. Be careful of that. It's not just in government, folks. Remember, Silicon Valley aims to supplant government. We're going to simplify things by controlling your every move and controlling every last aspect of life. The other thing is this. If we look at this FLoC thing, federated learning of cohorts, right? It's a way for Google and its cohorts to learn about you. That's why they call it that. But they're saying that instead of learning about you individually, like, hey, I'm Marc Arena, and I search for Danish watches, and I search for restaurants, and I search for antique cars, right? So there you go. You now know about me. So they claim that you can put an individual in a bucket. And look, my buddy Jimmy and I, we really break the mold. Like, he listens to Romanian folk music and deer hunting metal. And I have a lot of definitely varied interests, right? So we're not going to fit in these buckets. But Google is quite skeptical, and they're not far from the truth when they're saying that most people just fit into a bucket, right? That you're not an individual, you're a type, right? Like you're a Bills fan, you're a Buffalo Bills fan who likes pizzerias. And I mean, there is a Rochester type, by the way. It's an overweight Bills fan who only eats pizza and buys dog treats for their dog. And they go to the Adirondacks once a year, and that's all they do. And that's very, very, very accurate and descriptive of a typical Rochester person, right? They're just in that bucket. They don't stray from that bucket. They don't have any other interests. And that's all they do. And like a lot of them might drink a lot too. That's really, yeah, I mean, that's, so in the case of Rochester, yeah, this federated learning of cohorts might do well. The shift to FLoC has been criticized as putting too much control in Google's hands, right? Just like I said a few seconds ago with the URLs, right? We're going to control URLs. Users and advocates must reject FLoC, said the Electronic Frontier Foundation, right? We've talked about them before. And other misguided attempts to reinvent behavioral targeting, right? Behavioral targeting. They're targeting you based on your behavior. We implore Google to build a truly user-friendly web. Remember, you can use Google without Chrome, right? They're saying you can use the Google search engine without using the evil Chrome browser. Because again, people say, I use the Googles. Well, hang on. There's the Google browser and there's the Google search engine. I would recommend you use, instead of the Google Chrome browser, I'd recommend you use Firefox or Brave, right? And use DuckDuckGo as your search engine. 99% of the time, I use DuckDuckGo. A couple times a year, I'll use Google if I want to get a different result. But it is possible to switch. It's very possible. Right? A lot of times these monopolies make it difficult to leave them, right? Either through a personal addiction, like, I like Outlook and I like all the features. But with DuckDuckGo, it's very easy to switch. Your life, your experience does not change. Whenever I go to a new client, I try to keep their experience the same, keep it consistent with what they're used to. So switching them to DuckDuckGo means very little interruption in their routine. It's not much different, okay? Andy Yen, the founder of ProtonMail, says a browser clearly doesn't need to collect any information on its users in order to do its job, right? Firefox doesn't do that. And, Firefox isn't perfect. They beg you to create a Firefox account, and they beg you for updates and whatever. But Firefox, by far, is my favorite browser. And I have a little script that I implant in it to calm it down and tell it not to nag you. But up until 10 years ago, or even 5 years ago, most of the browsers didn't suck all of your information. And by the way, you can also look into Opera. They're a plucky little alternative, also ran, that's been around since at least 94. I started using it around 94. And I kind of forgot about them, as most of the world has. But Opera is a Chrome-based browser, and I'm sure at this nowadays they had to base themselves on the Chrome engine because they had to pick one of the major oligopolies, right, to base themselves on now. They couldn't be totally independent anymore. But I'm sure they're better than Chrome as far as ethics, okay? So, yeah, browsers don't need to collect your information, right? Just like your cars. Up until 5-10 years ago, your cars didn't collect all your location and your behavior and your speed. They just brought you places. That's what a browser is supposed to do as well. It's supposed to bring you to websites. DuckDuckGo says it's now seeing a surge in downloads. Of course, because anytime Google's in the news for doing something bad, business over across the street over at DuckDuckGo usually doubles or trebles. Apple does not monetize data in the same way. Its business model is to sell devices and services. Well, its business model actually is to sell you a device and then destroy the device within 2 years with its update attacks. So that you have to buy a new $1,000 phone every 2 years. Luckily, you can turn off those attacks. Go to Settings, General, Software Update, turn off all the switches. The last decade has seen a steady erosion of your privacy, right? What do we say all the time? Erosion of your freedoms. Every day, billions of laws are created, right? And people say, I'm afraid of tyranny. Well, billions of laws are created right under your nose without any tyrants. So Silicon Valley, meanwhile, is eroding your privacy as well as your freedom. You have traded away your privacy for convenience, right? They dangle the convenience. Facebook said that privacy is a thing of the past, says security expert Mike Thompson, referring to Mark Zuckerberg's comment a decade ago. And if Google took my privacy seriously, I wouldn't see repetitive ads all over my social media. Well, that's interesting because in theory, I turn off all of the Google spying as much as I can. And at that point, Google just has to guess at what I like. But still, there's plenty they can guess at. So what happens next is down to all of us, right? And that's what I say all the time. It's up to you. No law can ever stop these people. The only thing laws can do is make the world more ultra complex and erode your freedoms and create more barriers to entry for new competitors. So stop with the knee-jerk reaction of needing to call for reforms and needing more laws. Okay, and don't forget the Google history scandal. Even if you're not on Chrome, if you have a Gmail account, the day you signed up for Gmail, well, actually, the day that Gmail decided to do it anyway. From now on, anyone who signs up for Gmail, and anyone really, Google records every website you ever go to. If you want proof of that, go to google.com/history. And if you need help flushing all of that history and telling them not to spy on you, that's one of the things that my apprentices and I do. Well, as usual, that one took longer because of my side notes, but I believe they're important. So let me know, folks, by the way. Give me some feedback. Send me an email, support@technosophy.com. Let me know how you are enjoying this show. And, of course, tell your friends. Do another couple articles here. WallStreetJournal.com, U.S. pipeline cyberattack forces closure. Colonial Pipeline carries roughly 45% of gasoline and diesel fuel consumed on the East Coast. The main pipeline carrying gasoline and diesel to the U.S. East Coast was shut down by its operator after being hit with a cyber attack. This is hysterical. I could see in a small business, right? But these are huge businesses. It's such a crying shame that some IT joker who makes $100,000 a year and has a big scraggly beard does not understand at this point in history that you should stop using Microsoft products. As soon as you do that, you will have dramatically less problems. It will be astronomically unlikely to ever have an issue. Colonial Pipeline operates the 5,500-mile pipeline, taking fuel from the refineries in the Gulf Coast up to the New York metro area. They took certain systems offline to contain the threat, which has temporarily halted all pipeline operations. Again, that's what I said a few seconds ago. Shame on anyone who thinks that Microsoft technology is acceptable. Okay. I'm going to do one more here. Lest I overwhelm you, I'm not going to do a lot more. I'll just do one more article here. Autoweek.com. China's first Robotaxi service launches in Beijing ahead of the Olympics. And again, this is 2021. Baidu launches Apollo Go Robotaxis in Beijing. A number of developers are currently testing driverless Level 4 taxis in geofenced areas, okay? And it's kind of like invisible fence in a way, except it's not physical. Geofencing means you program a car so that it's not allowed to go beyond a certain distance, right? The car has a GPS built into it with the map and the screen and all that, right? So geofencing is an evil, sinister technology where you can tell a car, hey, you are not allowed to operate outside the boundaries of this town or this block or this neighborhood or whatever you want, okay? It's very, very sinister because, again, the potential for abuse, right? It's a technology that exists. It can be used for good or bad, but the potential for abuse is wild. It's kind of like, all right, you tell your kid, don't go beyond the neighborhood. When I was little, I would go on bike rides, and my mom would say, don't get out of the neighborhood. You can ride your bike in the neighborhood. Okay, fine. So that's the concept of geofencing, right? It's not a physical barrier, but she told me I couldn't leave the neighborhood. So that's that. In case you ever wondered what that meant. Uber and Lyft have dropped autonomous research units entirely, selling them to cut costs, which indicates how close they think we are to robotaxis becoming a reality, right? And again, in Uber and Lyft's defense, right, they say in this article, like, Uber and Lyft haven't even made a profit yet, even with their current business model, no less with the AI driverless garbage. But Uber and Lyft should really focus on the human beings here, okay? There are millions of people out there who would love a job. You know how much Uber and Lyft have helped? I would have loved to have Uber and Lyft when I got out of college. It's a great, honest way to make a living helping someone out, giving people rides, right? It's a great win-win in a basic sense. It's a great win-win. And I'm sure it's not perfect and the politics behind it, blah, blah, blah. But they're helping millions of people go out there and make an honest living, being productive, helping someone out. Why would you take that away from people who have hungry mouths to feed? Why would you take that away from people and give it to evil computers that smash into things? Okay? Why would you do that? It just concentrates the power in the hands of the few, and it takes money away from the many, in my professional opinion. Okay. Riders can use this Baidu Apollo Go app to locate a taxi and summon it, and also have to scan a QR code and a health code on the car in order to enter. All right, so now you're not allowed to get into a robotaxi unless they approve of your health. How do you get the health code? Is there an evil app in your phone that monitors your oxygen level? Right? How do they do this? Right? Again, it's trick technology, as they say. But where's the freedom? Where are the ethics? Right? If you raise a generation without ethics, then of course they're going to be dazzled by, oh, look what I can do. Right? We have a generation of Dr. Moreaus who do things because they can and never question if they should. That's a great concept in my book, right? Buy my book for everyone you know. We have a generation who was never taught morals, logic, ethics, common sense, or whether or not we should do something. They just go out there and they have this great weapon of AI and technology in their hands, and they're babies and they don't know what they're doing, and they're just firing it off at different places, destroying pieces of humanity. Health codes in order to get into a robotaxi. Is this how you want your future? Start raising awareness. That's what you can do right now, is raise awareness. I'm just a small guy. Yeah, start raising awareness right now. Help me raise awareness. Warn people. Is that the future you want? Because even if this whole generation was never taught philosophy and morals and anything else, you can point out to people, look, there's reality here. There's a real pain that comes with being controlled. Raise awareness. There's no backup driver inside, but there's a remote backup driver in case of emergency. Yeah, well, just like in the situation, there have been other situations where the remote driver was sitting in a room somewhere, quote unquote, asleep at the wheel, just eating potato chips or whatever, and monitoring multiple smart cars at the same time, right? How are you going to do that? You're watching 20 taxis, and you're going to somehow have a rapid reaction when one of them is headed for a crash? How does that happen? It's fair to say all current robotaxis in operation remain in very geofenced areas, right? And look, instead of this geofencing control that I explained a while ago, why don't they just put pods on rails, right? Look at the trolleys in the 50s. Look at the trolleys. They were more or less automated. They went back and forth, and they stayed in their own lane, and they didn't smash into random people, places, and things. Stick a pod on a rail, and if you want to have it be autonomous and electronic, fine, because it's on its own rail, and it won't smash into things, right? You're welcome, okay? Apparently people don't see how that... I think it's a genius idea. I just came up with it. But apparently people don't understand that because they worship complexity and they worship technology for technology's sake, right? So what about a little pod, a little trolley, even if they're individual pods? If you remember Masdar City, it was an experiment they did out in the Middle East where they were going to make a quote-unquote smart city. They're just pods on rails, so they're not smashing into things and running people over. Even though Baidu's robotaxis are paid services, it's not the same thing as profitable services, right? I mean, Amazon, back in 2005 when I was in college, Amazon wasn't profitable yet. They were certainly paid. I still had to pay for the books I ordered on there, but it wasn't profitable. It's worth noting that Uber and Lyft have recently unloaded their autonomous research, R&D, to third parties, so they didn't shut them down completely. They just sold them off to third parties and probably said, hey, look, good luck with this R&D. If you ever get something someday, then sell it to us cheaply. This should give you a pretty good idea of just when they expect robotaxis to come online in a meaningful scale and when they expect them to actually be profitable. So again, even if you have human taxis or robotaxis, that doesn't mean they are profitable yet. That's another hurdle. So neither company has been able to accomplish about a decade after getting human drivers. That's my take on all this. That's what I've got to say. So we will keep continuing with the articles on our next episode. I'm going to try to get another special guest for you next week. I've got a lot of good stuff in the pipeline as always. So remember, raise awareness, right? What did we talk about? Stop using Chrome. Okay, tell them what you've told them, right? Stop using Chrome. If you work for a company, tell them to stop using Microsoft. And if you don't want your every move to be controlled and geofenced, then please raise awareness among your peers. Tell them about the show. Ask them to question everything, right? I was taught, I was a clueless kid, but the one thing I was taught was question everything. My great uncle Frank taught me question everything. And maybe it'll be okay, but the point is question everything And especially question things that people are just blindly accepting. Oh, it's the wave of the future. We have to have Alexa. We have to have AI cars. We have to have all this. No. When they're all falling off a cliff, I call it the emperor's new clothes, the emperor's new phone. Okay, when they're all, oh, we need the latest and greatest phone because I was told to. It's sad, but why are the majority of people so blindly accepting of all this? I just buy a new phone every year because they told me to, or because it was slow. Question everything, folks. If you want to help me protect people from big tech for a living, then head on over to becomeanexorcist.com. Or if you know anyone who wants to do that, send them my way. Have a great week. Talk to you next time.
It's alright now. Make it on my own. I paid my time and my dues, and now I'm coming home. First they give you an inch, and then they take